Hello, folks. Thanks very much for having me along today. Nice to meet you. The digital world is a fabulous one, isn't it? But I'm going to take a chance to talk to you today about my life on paper. In a way, how did that begin? Well, let me give a shout out straight away to Bryn Hyfryd Library. Thank you, Bryn Hyfryd Library. I was lucky enough to go to Bryn Hyfryd School, which meant that Bryn Hyfryd Library was my local library from the time I started my junior school. And that meant that I was in the hands of librarians. Now, what to say about librarians? Well, they are wonderful people. That's the first thing, because they are the people who introduced me to the worlds belonging to Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, the Famous Five, the Secret Seven. Remember all of those? They were all on the shelves that were low enough for small children to be able to reach them, and I really did reach them. I was a voracious reader from a young age. Mum and Dad read, and there were books around the house, but they weren't really necessarily that suitable for a young child. But I did enjoy the adventures that I was able to go on, not just through the pages of the book, but in my imagination. And isn't that the thing about a book, folks? It's not just about the words you read on the page, it's about the places that those words allow your imagination to take you. And having been awestruck by all of those places, it really wasn't very long before I decided I too wanted to create places from my own imagination and put them on paper. Were you one of those children at school where the teacher would give you an essay to write and then you'd hand it in and they'd say, "Oh, thank you very much. I didn't ask for a book, but thank you." I was one of those children, but I'm very glad that I did what I did when I did it, because it did mean that from my love of reading, and certainly libraries allowed me to become the reader I was, then I grew into a love of writing. And now, one of the greatest things in my whole life is to be able to walk into a library and see books that I have written on the shelves in that library. It's it's quite an extraordinary feeling, actually. You sort of go in there and you have to pinch yourself. You're rubbing spines with authors you've grown up knowing the names of. And that's the other thing about books. They're timeless. Isn't that wonderful? I'm still discovering books that were written 50, 60, 70 years ago. And there are so many more that I've yet to discover. And the idea that some people might find my books now, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, or, oh, who knows, a bit longer than that, for me, that's magical. It's a bit like traveling through time myself, because I think that's as close as I'm going to get to it. It's getting a bit grey now. But anyway, back to libraries. Of course, libraries have changed a great deal over the years. My memory is of the smell of the library that I first knew. I'm not going to say it was always pleasant, but it was quite distinctive. The smell of books is very important, but of course, it's a place where all life takes place as well. And going into a library, whatever the specifics of the smell, it always felt warm, safe. I was cosseted, and I was surrounded by thousands of people, all in the pages of all of those books on the shelves. Thanks to the librarians who introduced me to my earliest mystery reading, my mum was able to take me on to the next step herself. Now, she was an avid reader of Agatha Christie, and I don't know if you remember those Pan paperbacks with the wonderful artwork by Tom Adams on the front. It was quite surreal, quite scary in some cases. I loved those covers. I always remember the one with the giant wasp and the little biplane that was Death in the Clouds. Now, Mum had those books. She'd gathered them from second-hand stalls in Swansea Market, which is where my gran also used to take me. There was a second-hand bookstall there where she would rotate her romance titles, and she did let me read some of those, but I don't know, they didn't quite take. I just kept waiting for someone to die in a grisly manner. Yeah, you can blame Agatha Christie for that. I've been pretty much the same way ever since, I have to admit. But once Mum allowed me to be introduced to the world of Agatha Christie, which was about the age of 10, I would say, I quickly went on from there to read, oh, Neo Marsh. Oh, and I was also picking up Ellery Queen books at the library. Remember those in the yellow Golanx thriller covers? I could reach those too because they were on the lower shelves. Although I must admit, looking back, I really didn't understand half of what was in the books. Just as well, really, eh? Anyway, so I went on to what I later came to know was the golden age of detection, versions of puzzle plot mysteries. And I must admit that's pretty much where my heart has remained ever since then. I do enjoy a good puzzle plot, which is not to say I don't enjoy thrillers, domestic thrillers, international thrillers, action stories. I do enjoy all of those. Give me a good John le Carre and I can settle down for a few days and not talk to anybody. But it's those golden age style of puzzle plot mysteries that really appealed to me because I liked to work out the clues. I mean, they're not a million miles away from the famous Five and the Secret Seven when you think about it, where there were codes and ciphers and clues to be followed and red herrings all over the place. And Agatha Christie's Poirot and Miss Marple certainly followed in that mould, and I thoroughly enjoyed investigating alongside them. So maybe it's not much of a surprise that when I came to write my own first novel, which features Kate Morgan and is called The Corpse with a Silver Tongue, that's very much a puzzle plot mystery. There's a missing gold necklace that's possibly cursed. There's a man who drops dead at a dinner table, and everybody at the dinner is, of course, a suspect, including my protagonist, Kate Morgan, who, bless her heart, is not unlike me. Welsh Canadian. Yes, I'm speaking to you from my home on the west coast of Canada at the moment. She's also from Swansea. She migrated for reasons that are much darker than the ones I migrated for, pleased to say. But she, like me, as I say, Welsh Canadian. She's a professor of criminal psychology and finding herself a suspect at a dinner party in the murder of a man she once worked for and frankly didn't like at all. Um, yeah, that puts her in a bit of a pickle, really. So she has to investigate her way out of that situation in order to be able to be allowed to leave the south of France. Now, ordinarily, I would think getting stuck in the south of France for an extended period of time would be a good thing. In fact, that's why I set the mystery there. I did used to spend an extended period of time in the south of France, and two of my friends who live there allowed me to set the murder in their apartment. So I've used a real setting, fake people, and a setup where there are lots of puzzles, lots of red herrings, and a final denouement where everything is pulled together and the killer or killers are unmasked. I love that shape of a book. Do you? It's a classic golden age detection shape of book. And as I say, it's not much of a surprise that I was drawn to it, given my reading background and the role that those library books played in my life. Now, when it came to the Kate Morgan mystery series, I decided I would like to keep going with that sort of pattern where Kate is a sleuth. She's using her professional abilities, but she's sleuthing these particular mysteries. And she always faces a puzzle plot. They're plot driven rather than necessarily character driven. But the nice thing is, she gets to visit a different country in each book. Which is great because I love to travel, and particularly these days, let's be honest, we're not getting to do a lot of that, are we? So, armchair travel was what appealed to me anyway. And when the first book came out in 2012, I couldn't have imagined that coming up to 2022, we'd all be so grateful for a series of books that took us traveling around the world. I'm now very grateful I wrote them because I get to travel while I write them. Yay! Perfect. Anyway, that was very much a golden age series. Puzzle plot, different cast of characters each book. But I then got the opportunity to write another series of books, and it gave me an opportunity to set them in Wales, which I'm ever so pleased about. The Wise Inquiries Agency mysteries feature four professional female private investigators. So these are not amateurs sleuthing their way through something where they just fall over a dead body. They were actually paid to investigate cases, although in their case, those cases begin as quite small problems and tend to snowball into rather larger ones. Um, Now, The series of books start with these women having their office in London, close to where I used to live in London, actually. But I quite quickly decamped them over to the Wye Valley, Powys. They're not far from Hay on Wye in a fictional Welsh stately home, and their new office is based in the converted barn on the estate grounds of that stately home. So you get to visit the lush countryside of Wales with little side trips down to Gower and Swansea and Cardiff and Pembrokeshire, all over the place. And it's been great for me to have the opportunity to introduce readers around the world to places that I know and love. Because ultimately, being a Welsh writer, I did want to bring my readers home to Wales with me. Having already set the mould for Kate to travel from book to book to book to book, I did at least send her to Wales to get married. So I thought that was quite nice of me. But beyond that, she does need to keep on her toes and keep moving. So the Wise Inquiries Agency mysteries all take place in Wales, which I enjoy and I hope you enjoy. And then I decided to go dark. Oh, I love reading thrillers, and I like those thrillers that are very brooding and dark and mysterious and focus on a very small place where everybody's affected by one dark deed within their midst. Now, I grew up in Swansea, so of course at weekends and summer holidays we'd visit Gower. And one of the most atmospheric places in Gower, I think if you know it, you'll agree, is Rosilly. Now, we all know that Rosilly, the rock formation there looks like a dragon rising up out of the sea, and maybe we take that for granted. But what I took was that inspiration and reinvented it. It's not Rosilly in the book. It's inspired by Rosilly. So we have the Dragon's Head pub, Rosthraig, the nice little small village there, which is populated with, let's just say, relatively unusual people, shall we? Nothing like the real Rosilly at all, because this one's full of dark characters with lots of secrets. And three generations of women run the pub there. The daughter, who's still in school, her mum and her mum, and they're quite the trio between them. And I wanted to write a book that wasn't really about nice people. They're not horrible people. I always try and write about relatable people. And I think that's come from my early reading. To be honest with you, I didn't really find the characters in Enid Blyton books to be relatable. They had a very different upbringing than I did. And I know they were different times. But when it came to it, and I had the chance, I wanted to put something on the page that those reading it could say, well, that's not quite me, but I know someone a bit like that. And I think that's nice. It's a sort of a touchstone when you're reading that allows you to take ownership of the story that you're reading. But you know what? Even if you don't read The Wrong Boy, which is my dark psychological suspense novel set in Rosthraig, not Rosilly, or if you like the Wise Inquiries Agency mysteries, which are really quite cosy. There are lots of cups of teas and Victoria sponges being eaten, bourbon biscuits, call them what you will, Nice biscuits, oh yes, Garibaldi's, lots of biscuits. I like biscuits. I get to write about biscuits quite a lot. Pots of tea. There are cats, there are puppies, Labrador puppies, oh, and of course, puzzling mysteries to solve. But the team is on it, so they're all good. And you know what? The interesting thing about those women, one is Welsh, one is Irish, one is Scottish, one is English. See? WISE, Wise Inquiries Agency. So, as the four home nations do at certain times of the year, rugby season, there is a little bit of rub between those four ladies, but they pull together and use their strengths and solve the case every time. Or maybe you like to travel the world with Kate Morgan, who apparently sounds and looks very much like me. I wonder why that is. Here in Canada, not having been able to come to Wales for years now, I'm missing you folks. I'm missing my mum. I'm missing my sister. I'm missing everything along the South Wales coast. But at least I can travel there in my heart and between the pages of a book. And next time I'm there, I know I'll actually be in a real live library with real live librarians, and I'll be there in person. And I can't wait to go in and smell the smell and feel the pages once again and feel that warm, comforting, cosseting cocoon around me. That is how I always think of libraries. So, thank you to the librarians at Brynhyfryd Library during the 1960s. Without you, I would not have been able to indulge my love of reading. And without my love of reading, I would never have grown to have a love of writing. I very much enjoy my life now as a full time author. And I know I've got readers around the world who enjoy what I do, so I'm very grateful to them. But I'm also grateful to those librarians who kicked off my love of reading in the first place. I'll be there as soon as I possibly can. And if you're not going to read my books, you know what? Read the books of other Crime Cymru authors. There are some fantastic crime stories being set in Wales and written by Welsh authors. Let's finally bang our own drum and sound our own trumpet for crime. That didn't come out right, did it? But you know what I mean, right? Thanks very much indeed for letting me into your life for a little bit of time today. Go read. Borrow from a library, read on a tablet, read in paper, share the love of books that you've got, because you never know how it might touch somebody else's life and where that might lead. Just look at me. Thank you. Bye bye.